I love history and music, and folk songs from long ago can tell us a lot about people usually left out of his story, history. Women, servants, and people who were enslaved have always been in the majority of the population, but they seldom appear in accounts from centuries past. They were too busy keeping the world going, and few had the time or the ability to write about their lives. The songs that average folks created and enjoyed are little time capsules that let us hear their thoughts. This is the kind of history I am interested in: what people wore, how they spoke, what they ate, what they found funny, and how they saw themselves and their world. In 1643, as the colonies first filled with immigrants, a fellow named Edward Johnson wrote a ballad set to an old tune called In Peascod Times. It was part of the debate over whether it was worth it to come to New England. Johnson wrote it not to attract people to come, but to amuse the people already here. Edward called his song New England's Annoyances. Everyone in the small community knew it, and they took delight in complaining, but were proud of their fortitude and cunning. There are 16 verses lamenting the lack of grassy fields, the winter, the slugs, the squirrels, the deer. But the food was good, especially the seafood, and they brewed comforting spirits out of what was available, including pumpkins, wood chips, and corn stalks. Here is New England's Annoyances. New England's annoyances, ye that would know them, pray ponder these verses which briefly doth show them. The place where we live is a wilderness wood, where grass is much wanting that's fruitful and good. From the end of November till 3 months agone, the ground is all frozen as hard as a stone. Our mountains and hills and our valleys below being commonly covered with ice and with snow. And when the northwester with violence blows, then every man pulls his cap over his nose. If any so hardy and will it withstand, he forfeits a finger, a foot, or a hand. When the ground opens, we then take the hoe and make the ground ready to plant and to sow. Our corn being planted and seed being sown, the worms destroy much before it is grown. And while it is growing, much spoil there is made by birds and by squirrels that pluck up the blade. And when it is come to full corn in the ear, it's apt to be spoiled by hog, raccoon, and deer. Our money's soon counted, for we have just none. All that we brought with us is wasted and gone. We buy and sell nothing but upon exchange, which makes all our dealings uncertain and strange. And now our garments begin to grow thin, and wool is much wanted to card and to spin. If we get a garment to cover without, our innermost garment is clout upon clout. Our clothes we brought with us are apt to be torn. They need to be clouted before they are worn. But clouting our garments doth injure us nothing. Clouts double are warmer than single whole clothing. flesh meat be wanting to fill up our dish. We've carrots and pumpkins and turnips and fish, and when we've a mind for a delicate dish, we repair to the clam banks and take what we wish. Instead of pottage and puddings and custards and pies, our turnips and parsnips are common supplies. We have pumpkin at morning and pumpkin at noon. If it were not for pumpkins, we should be undoomed. If barley be wanting to make into malt, we must be contented and think it no fault. For we can make liquor to sweeten our lips of pumpkins and parsnips and walnut tree chips. And of our green corn stalks we make our best beer. We put it in barrels to drink all the year. Yet I am as healthy, I verily think, who makes the spring water my commonest drink. And we have a covenant one with another, which makes a division twixt brother and brother. For some are rejected and others made saints, of those that are equal in virtues and wants. For such like annoyance we've many mad fellows find fault with our apples before they are mellow. And they are for England, they will not stay here, but mate with a lion and shunning a bear. Now while some are going, let others be coming, for while liquor is boiling, it must have a scumming. But we will not blame them, for birds of a feather, by seeking their fellows, are flocking together. But you who the Lord intends hither to bring, forsake not the honey for fear of the sting, but bring both a quiet and contented mind, and all needful blessings ye surely shall find. Today, music is mainly entertainment. It's everywhere, often in the background, and we don't pay much attention to it. But in centuries past, music did a lot more than just entertain. For those who could not read or afford a newspaper, ballads spread the latest news, whether political or just scandalous. Soldiers marched to fife and drum tunes, and lovers sang passionate songs. Dancing was a major pastime and part of your education if you were lucky enough to have one. People sang to coordinate their work, as in sea shanties, where on a certain word, sailors pulled together to lift a sail that could literally weigh a ton. Life was full of boring tasks that took a long time. People sang while churning butter, chopping wood, spinning thread, plowing fields, feeding the chickens, washing clothes, stirring puddings, weeding the garden, mending socks, and on and on. The lullaby has been called the world's oldest work song. And when the sun went down, a long ballad passed the evening by the fire. There are old ballad books with songs with 60 verses, 80 verses. There was a lot of time to listen to them because there were no screens to watch. And there was no recorded music. If you wanted music, you had to make it yourself. There were few instruments, but singing was accessible to all. Classical music was revered and preserved, but folk songs spread simply by being sung. There were a few collections of melodies for dancing and of popular ballads, but mostly it was a tradition passed down through the generations by ear. Songs contained wisdom. Here is one with some advice about how to survive old age. In the days of my youth, I could bill like a dove. Fa la 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 dee. In the days of my youth, I could bill like a dove, like a sparrow at all times was ready for love. Fa la 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 dee, fa la 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 dee, fa la 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 dee. The life of all mortals in kissing should pass. Fa la 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 dee. The life of all mortals in kissing should pass. Lip to lip when you're young, then the lip to the glass. Fa la 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 dee, fa la 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 dee, fa la 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 dee. Everyone drank a great deal of alcohol. It dulled pain for which there was no aspirin or other painkillers. Water was known to be dangerous because it was often polluted. To preserve food, people salted, dried, smoked, pickled, and made milk into butter and cheese. Perishable grain and fruit became beer, wine, and cider, drunk by all ages at every meal. In the colonies and elsewhere, religion was a huge part of life. Before the Revolution, the church and the government were pretty much the same thing. People attended 2 different services each Sunday, morning and afternoon, with a break for potluck at a nearby tavern. A good long sermon was entertaining, especially if it evoked the fires of hell and promised satisfying justice. The hymns were unaccompanied, or maybe with one instrument, but not an organ, and there were no hymnals. A leader lined out a hymn, singing a line which was repeated. It took a while, but everybody had a fair amount of time. And I have read that the custom in New England was to sing as loudly as you could in church so that God could hear your voice rising up to heaven. There are writings from ministers and others who lament this custom and wish that things could be toned down a bit. This hymn, still sung today, has a philosophy that remains with us in the idea that which does not kill you makes you stronger. God sent trials to make you a better person, to burn away your imperfections, the way that burning gold purifies it by removing base metals, the dross. These words are by John Keith, written in 1778, to the tune Protection. Hymn melodies had many sets of words and their own names. Here is How Firm a Foundation. How firm a foundation, ye saints of the Lord, is laid for your faith in his excellent word. What more can he say than to you he hath said, who unto the Saviour for refuge have fled? Fear not, I am with thee, O be not dismayed, for I am thy God, and will still give thee aid. I'll strengthen thee, help thee, and cause thee to stand, upheld by my righteous, omnipotent hand. When through the deep waters I call thee to go, the rivers of sorrow shall not overflow, for I will be near thee, thy troubles to bless, and sanctify to thee thy deepest distress. When through fiery trials thy pathway shall lie, his grace all sufficient shall be thy supply. The flame shall not harm thee, his only design, thy dross to consume and thy gold to refine. The soul that on Jesus has leaned for repose, I will not desert to his foes. That soul, though all hell shall endeavor to shake, I will never, no never, no never forsake. Suffering was guaranteed in this vale of tears, but there was comfort in the thought that God would never abandon you, but be with you through your trials. Words and music were not as connected as they are now. Everyone knew hundreds of tunes, and good ones got many sets of words, just as hymns were poems set to whatever existing melody worked best. Ballad writers churned out cheap broadsides, big pieces of paper with no notes given, just an instruction to sing the poem to some familiar melody. During the 1750s, England and France were at war in Europe, and they were also fighting here. Here it was called the French and Indian War, because various tribes fought with one side or the other. The colony of New France and its allies, among them the Algonquin, Ottawa, and Micmac, fought against the English and their allies, the Mohawk, Oneida, Seneca, and others. George Washington was a colonel in the British Army and surely sang this regimental march, which dates from 1678, the British Grenadiers. The Grenadiers were the frontline troops. Originally, their job was to run up to the glacis, the area in front of a fort, and hurl hand grenades, little bomblets, over the walls. By the 1700s, firearm accuracy had improved, and they no longer did this, but they were still called grenadiers. Some talk of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander and such great names as these. But of all the world's great heroes, there's none that can compare with a tow-row-row and a row-row-row to the British Grenadiers.
Those heroes of antiquity ne'er saw a cannonball, or knew the force of powder to slay their foes withal. But our brave boys do know it, and banish all their fears. Sing a ta-row-row and a row-row-row for the British Grenadiers. Whene'er we are commanded to storm the palisades, our leaders march with fusees and we with hand grenades. We throw them from the glasses about the enemy's ears. Sing a ta-row-row and a row-row-row for the British Grenadiers. And when the siege is over, we to the town repair. The townsmen cry, hurrah, boys, here comes a grenadier. Here come the grenadiers, me boys, who know no doubts or fears. Sing ta-row-row and a row-row-row for the British Grenadiers. Then let us fill a bumper and drink a health to those who carry caps and pouches and wear the looped clothes. May they and their commanders live happy all their years. Sing a ta-row-row and a row-row-row for the British Grenadiers.
One of the more horrifying facts from the 18th century is that footwear did not come in lefts and rights. In one manual, British soldiers were advised to swap their boots weekly so they wouldn't run crooked. I can't imagine anyone actually did this, but at this time, looking good was more important than feeling good. One British officer during the French and Indian War was not impressed by the Yankees he had to serve alongside. He wrote a little poem poking fun at them, and he set his words to a tune that had been around so long it was called The Air from Who Knows Where. It had a slightly different melody than the one we know today. Here's what he wrote. Yankee Doodle went to town a-riding on a pony. He stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. A macaroni was a huge Italian wig. It looked as if you dumped a bowl of pasta on your head, and it was also slang for a man just encrusted with finery, wearing silk and lace and powder and rouge. The joke is that this doodle, this silly person, thinks he's the height of fashion because he has a turkey feather in his cap. Also, a grown man looks kind of silly on a pony. Here's a bit more of what the British officer wrote. Brother Ephraim sold his cow and bought him a commission, and then he went to Canada to fight for the nation. But when Ephraim he came home, he proved an arrant coward. He wouldn't fight the Frenchmen there for fear of being devoured. Gentlemen like this British officer loved to gather in clubs to drink and sing. In the 1760s, members of the Anacreontic Club wrote to Anacreon in heaven, asking Anacreon, a long-dead Greek poet, to be their patron. Anacreon was famous for his odes to wine and love, both dear to the hearts of English gentlemen. Venus was the goddess of love, her symbolic plant myrtle, and Bacchus was the god of wine with his grapevine. Here is what they wrote, and you will recognize the melody. To Anacreon in heaven, where he sat in full glee, and a few sons of harmony sent a petition that he their inspirer and patron would be. When this answer arrived from the jolly old Grecian, voices, fiddle, and flute should no longer be mute. I'll lend ye my name and inspire ye to boot. And besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine. This melody became popular on both sides of the Atlantic, and Francis Scott Key used it for several of his poems before he created the Star-Spangled Banner. England built up huge debts in the French and Indian War and expected the colony it had saved from French conquest would be happy to pay taxes to help pay it off. It seemed quite reasonable to Parliament. But colonists were enraged that they had no representatives in Parliament where the taxes were decided. When the Townshend Acts of 1767 taxed paint, glass, tea, and a whole bunch of other things, colonists mounted a 2-year boycott of all British goods that caused huge losses. The colonies were a major market for British goods. In 1769, some lyrics appeared anonymously in the Boston Newsletter, calling on women to stop using imported goods. Ladies of fashion were urged to wear homespun cloth and to refuse marriage proposals from any man not keeping the boycott. They were to drink Labrador instead of Bohea or green hyson tea, or as the song pronounces it, tay, which I believe is how people back then said the word tea, the way the Irish still do. Have a cup of tea. Labrador was brewed from an evergreen bush. The song was Young Ladies in Town, aimed at fashionable consumers, not country bumpkins. Fashion has always had tremendous power.
Young ladies in town and those that live round, wear none but your own country linen. Of economy boast, let your pride be the most to show clothes of your own make and spinning. If homespun, they say, be not quite as gay as brocades, be not in a passion. For once it is known, 'tis much worn in town, one and all will cry out, 'tis the fashion. And as one agree, you'll not married be to such as will wear London factory. At first sight refuse, pray tell 'em you'll choose to encourage our own manufactory. No more ribbons wear, nor in rich silks appear. Love your country much better than fine things. Begin without passion, 'twill soon be the fashion to grace your smooth locks with a twine string. Throw away your Bohea and your green hyson tea and all things of a new fashion duty. Get in a good store of the choice Labrador, there will soon be enough here to suit ye. These do without fear, and to all you'll appear fair, charming, true, lovely, and clever. Though times remain darkish, young men will be sparkish and love you much stronger than ever.
The next year, in 1768, British troops were sent to occupy the troublesome town of Boston. The Crown did not build barracks for them, but ordered residents to take them into their houses. As good subjects of the king, people should be happy to oblige, but they were not. The soldiers were poorly paid and received meager food rations, so they hired themselves out for menial jobs at low wages, enraging Boston's workers and the unemployed. Street fights became common. Mobs and children taunted the troops. Bloody backs, lobster backs. Sam Adams and his Sons of Liberty were happy to fan the flames, and Paul Revere rode all over the colonies carrying vital messages as resistance grew. In 1770, a mob attacked soldiers with snowballs and rocks. The soldiers defended themselves in what became known as the Boston Massacre. Paul Revere made a fanciful engraving that so angered Bostonians that the British had to retreat to Castle Island, now a peninsula, but back then an island. They were cold and unhappy, and wrote a threatening song to a tune called The Dreadnought. It says that if King Hancock comes down with the yaws, an icky skin disease, the redcoats will cure him with a hard pill, by which they meant a lead bullet. And instead of just a few soldiers, each house would have half a score. A score is 20, so that's 10 soldiers hanging about drinking your cider and harassing your daughters.
You simple Bostonians, I'd have you beware of your liberty tree. I would have you take care, for if we should chance to return to the town, your houses and stores will come tumbling down. Derry down, 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 derry down. If you'll not agree to obey England laws, I fear that King Hancock may soon get the yaws, but he need not fear, for I swear we will. For the want of a doctor, give him a hard pill. Derry down, 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 derry down. A brave reinforcement we soon think to get, and then we will make you poor pumpkins to sweat. Our drums they will rattle, and then you will run to the devil himself from the sight of a gun. Derry down, 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 derry down. Our fleet and our army they soon will arrive, and to a bleak island you shall not us drive. In every house you shall have 3 or 4. If that doesn't please you, you'll have half a score. Derry down, 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 derry down.
The Old State House in Boston has an original broadside with the words to the Castle Island song. John Adams wound up defending the British soldiers, and they were acquitted as acting in self-defense. The same year as the massacre, 1770, Dr. Joseph Warren wrote 9 verses urging revolt. As was usually done, he set them to an existing melody. Which one did he pick? Why, England's proudest march, the British Grenadiers. The good doctor rhymed sky and liberty and obey with America. This is frequently the case in older songs. The rhymes don't seem to work, but it's only because we no longer pronounce these words the way they were pronounced in the 1770s. Warren predicted that our fleet would match those of England, France, and Spain. In 1770, we had no navy, just a few small merchant vessels, so this was a ludicrous idea. Here is Warren's Free Americae.
Lift up your hands, ye heroes, and swear with proud disdain. The wretch that would ensnare you shall spread his net in vain. Should Europe empty all her force, we'll meet them in array, and fight and shout and fight for free America. We led fair freedom hither, and lo, the desert smiled. A paradise of pleasure was opened in the wild. Your harvest bold, Americans, no power shall snatch away. Preserve, preserve, preserve your rights in a free America. Torn from a world of tyrants beneath this western sky, we formed a new dominion, a land of liberty. The world shall own we're freemen here, and such will ever be. Huzzah, 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 for free America. Some future day shall crown us the masters of the main. Our fleet shall speak in thunder to England, France, and Spain. Nations o'er the ocean spread shall tremble and obey the prince who rules by freedom's laws in North America.
5 years later, Dr. Warren was chair of the Committee of Safety, trying to make sure that nobody got hung for treason. He sent Paul Revere to Lexington to warn Sam Adams and John Hancock of troops coming to arrest them. The next morning, April 19th, members of the Lexington militia were killed on Lexington Green. The troops went on to Concord, where they met stiffer resistance. On the long retreat back to Boston, they were attacked by militia from many towns, enraged that British subjects had been killed by British bullets. Troops had confronted many other demonstrations, like the one on Lexington Green, but they had always dispersed people by firing off only powder, never lead bullets. The deaths shocked the colonists into action, and once the fighting began, there was no stopping it. The troops burned houses and killed people who were not fighting. Fifers and drummers played the British Grenadiers to keep the exhausted soldiers going. But another song was mentioned in the next day's newspapers. Upon their return to Boston, one Briton asked his brother officer how he liked the tune now. "Dang them," he replied, "they made us dance it till we were tired," since which Yankee Doodle sounds less sweet to their ears. This was a new version of Yankee Doodle, and obviously fifers and drummers with the militia played it to keep their men's spirits up and annoy the British. By now it had the melody we know. This song has never had any political content. It was just great to march to, and it acquired all kinds of verses with the type of humor you might expect from soldiers. In this first verse, they describe a Yankee supper, which is not going to fill you up. First we take a pinch of snuff, and then a drink of water, and then we say, "How do you do?" And that's a Yankee supper. Sheep's head and vinegar, buttermilk and tansy. Boston is a Yankee town, sing Yankee Doodle Dandy. Our Jemima's lost her mare and can't tell where to find her, but she'll come trotting by and bring her tail behind her. 2 and 2 may go to bed, 2 and 2 together, and if there is not room enough, lie one atop the other. Having 4 people in a bed was not unusual. In fact, quite welcome on a frigid winter night. Almost nobody had their own bed. Most families slept together with an increasing number of children. As the kids got older, they moved to pallets on the floor that could be rolled up and stowed away to make room for everyday activities. There were few actual bedrooms, just chambers used for sleeping that served other uses during the day. In an inn, often above a tavern, travelers shared beds with strangers. The song may also be referring to the New England practice of bundling. A visitor courting a daughter might be unable to return home, and the couple were allowed to share a bed with their clothes on and a bundling board under the covers between them. How well this worked can be gauged by the fact that over 40% of brides in New England in the late 1700s were pregnant when they got married. This was not considered a problem, but rather a good omen showing their fertility. Problems only arose if they did not marry, and towns were very eager to identify the fathers of any children born so that they could be made to support them. Well into the 19th century, men could be jailed for breach of promise. For many centuries, promising to marry someone was considered a binding contract. 2 months later, in June, Joseph Warren was killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill. The British won, but suffered tremendous losses, including some 100 officers. A British soldier was trained to follow orders unto death, but not to think for himself. Losing officers was a huge blow. First, you had to get word back to England that you needed a replacement. And then people had to pack up and get ready and sail all the way back across the Atlantic. Taking out officers became a favorite tactic. They were easy to spot, on horseback, yelling orders, with shiny gold epaulets. The British officers soon got off their horses and removed signs of rank. On July 3rd, 1775, over 20,000 men gathered on Cambridge Common, and George Washington took command of the Continental Army. In his book Washington's Crossing, David Hackett Fisher wrote about the challenge of leading volunteer soldiers against skilled regular troops. Washington was a Virginia gentleman. His plantation was profitable because of the free labor of hundreds of enslaved people. He considered New England a foreign place. He was appalled by undisciplined Yankees. The officers were so casual and indifferent to rank. George complained of the leveling spirit of New England, where the principles of democracy so universally prevail. New England regiments were the most literate in the world. Nearly all privates could read and write. A regiment from Marblehead reflected a maritime town. Indians and black men were accepted if they could do the job, just as on a ship. Regiments from elsewhere in the colonies disapproved, Washington included, but by the end of the war, black soldiers were actively recruited, and some rose to the rank of colonel in New England. Washington also had to deal with regiments from the back country, Maryland and Virginia, crack shots with their long rifles. Their rattlesnake flag showed that their idea of liberty was personal. Don't tread on me. There were also troops from Pennsylvania, sent by the Quakers, who were famously pacifists. They elected their officers and wore simple uniforms with no rank, for all are equal in the Quaker mindset. Then there were silk-stocking regiments, private groups with their own flamboyant uniforms. They rode up waving their swords, crying, "Here we are, General Washington!" Even privates expected to be treated as gentlemen, immune from corporal punishment, and able to resign if they were displeased. That was no way to run an army. George Washington's greatest achievement was forming this wild mix of Americans into a force that could be relied on to face the regulars of the British Army, the best soldiers in the world. A little sidelight on firearms. Muskets were the weapons of choice for both the British and the colonists. They were relatively quick to load because their barrel had a smooth bore. You dropped your bullet in one end, you set your powder off in the pan at the other end, and the bullet went down the barrel, bouncing off the sides. So when it came out the end, you really had no idea which direction it was going in. The tactic did not involve aiming with muskets. You got a whole bunch of guys into a mass. The ones in front dropped down on one knee while they were reloading. The ones behind them sent off a volley, a hail of lead, and all that lead inevitably hit something or other, but not what they were not aiming at. Now, rifles did exist, and they were much more accurate than muskets because they had a grooved barrel. It was called rifling. To load them, you put the ball in, and then you had to ram it down amongst the grooves to get it into position. This took way too long to be used in a battle. So unless you were acting as a sniper where time didn't matter so much, you left your rifles at home. A soldier's life could be extremely hard, especially those fighting with Washington. Colonists had no uniforms and brought their own guns. Shoeless American soldiers starved and froze in rags at places like Valley Forge. This light-hearted song nevertheless reflects the harsh reality. Soldier, will you marry me? It may seem odd to have a woman asking a man if he will marry her, but among the lower classes things were much less formal.
Soldier, soldier, will you marry me with your musket, fife, and drum?
Oh, how can I marry such a pretty girl as you when I have no hat to put on?
Off to the haberdasher she did go as fast as she could run. She bought him a hat, the best one there, and the soldier put it on. Soldier, soldier, will you marry me with your musket, fife, and drum?
Oh, how can I marry such a pretty girl as you when I have no coat to put on?
Off to the tailor's she did go as fast as she could run. She bought him a coat, the best one there, and the soldier put it on. Soldier, soldier, will you marry me with your musket, fife, and drum?
Oh, how can I marry such a pretty girl as you when I have no boots to put on?
Off to the cobbler's she did go as fast as she could run. She bought him a pair, the best ones there, and the soldier put them on. Soldier, soldier, will you marry me with your musket, fife, and drum?
Oh, how can I marry such a pretty girl as you with a wife and baby back home?
A man named William Lee was by George Washington's side throughout the war. He was enslaved, but he was a companion who matched Washington in horsemanship and daring. They loved to race through the countryside, leaping over fallen trees. William wore an exotic turban. Washington called him my fellow. And after the war, George gave William his freedom. In 1773, John Newton, a ship captain who carried enslaved people to the colonies, was caught in a storm. He prayed to God, as people do, that if he were saved, he would stop being such a wretched example of a human being. He wrote a poem about his redemption that was set to various tunes. Here is the earliest melody used for his words. It was called Tisbury. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see, was blind, but now I see, was blind, but now I see, was blind, but now I see. The melody that we love so much with these words arose in the 1820s or 30s, a blend of Scottish and African American ancestry. If you visited a military camp in the 18th century, you would see a surprising number of women and children. These were camp followers, women who lived and worked alongside the soldiers. Most were the wives or daughters of the soldiers. The army had no support system like it has today. The women cooked and did laundry and nursed the sick and wounded. They received a small wage and a half ration of food. When British troops left for America, they held a lottery to see who could bring along their supporter. Of course, there were also good time girls who followed the camps to help the soldiers relax. Joseph Plum Martin, a Connecticut private, joined the Continental Army as a teenager and later wrote a memoir. It's a grueling tale of starvation and an endless search for warm clothing and firewood. Partway through, he goes home on leave, thin and sick, and after recovering on Mom's cooking, you're amazed when he goes back. But the commitment was complete. Martin fought in the Battle of Monmouth, New Jersey in June 1778, the largest one-day battle of the war. 13,000 Americans faced 10,000 British, and it was over 100 degrees. Martin saw women bring water to the troops, who called, "Molly, pitcher, I need a pitcher, Molly." Many women were named Mary, and Molly was a nickname for Mary. Martin wrote in his memoir of seeing a woman helping her husband fire a cannon during the battle. A woman whose husband belonged to the artillery attended with her husband at the piece. While reaching for a cartridge, with one of her feet as far before the other as she could step, a cannon shot from the enemy passed between her legs without doing any other damage than carrying away all the lower part of her petticoat. Looking at it with apparent unconcern, she observed that it was lucky it did not pass a little higher. George Washington made this woman, Mary Hayes, a non-commissioned officer, and from then on she was called Sergeant Molly. In 1822, Pennsylvania granted her an annual pension of $40. A pension at this time was a priceless support as you got older. And many other women became the Molly Pitchers of legend. We have an excellent source of colonial-era music in a notebook kept by Captain George Bush, a paymaster in the 11th Pennsylvania Regiment from 1776 until the war's end in 1783. Bush was not related to the presidents. He copied songs from various places, including a London magazine that he received, The Songster's Companion. One of the songs is from a London play. A Scottish soldier asks his sweetheart if she will become a camp follower and carry his wallet, his pack with his money and tobacco. Can she leave her mammy and daddy, he asks, which is how the Scots still refer to their parents today. The casualness with which he invites her to go on campaign and even fight next to him shows that this was not an unusual idea.
Oh, say, bonny lass, can you lie in a barrack and marry a soldier and carry his wallet? Oh, say, will you leave both your mammy and daddy and follow to the camp with your soldier laddie? Oh, yes, I will do it and think nothing of it. I'll marry my soldier and carry his wallet. Oh yes, I will leave both my mammy and daddy and follow to the camp with my soldier laddie. say, bonny lass, will you go a-campaigning, endure all the hardships of battle and famine? When wounded and bleeding, then wilt thou draw near me, and kindly support me, and tenderly cheer me? Oh, say, bonny lass, will you go into battle, where drums are beating and cannons loud rattle? Oh, yes, my dear lad, I will share all thy harms, and should thou be killed, I will die in thy arms.
In 1775, the governor of Virginia, John Murray, the Earl of Dunmore, was driven from office and set up a government on a ship in the James River. He was joined by hundreds of loyalists in a floating town of 200 ships holding 3,000 people. One day, John Murray issued a proclamation that, quote, all indentured servants, Negroes, or others that are able and willing to bear arms were invited to join His Majesty's troops. This was not a policy from King George or the British government, but word spread like wildfire that the British were offering freedom for enslaved people who would fight for them. Soon there were hundreds of volunteers at the floating town who were formed into Ethiopian regiments. Among them were some from Virginia, a few from Mount Vernon, including a man named Harry Washington, 24 from Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, and several from the estate of Patrick Henry, who had recently thundered, "Give me liberty or give me death!" Well, his enslaved people were choosing liberty. For these founding fathers, the idea of liberty was very limited. It applied only to those whose circumstances suited them for liberty, white men who owned land. Everyone else had been put in their proper place by God, who was in charge of everything, and they should focus on obeying their earthly masters and await their reward in heaven. Eventually, some 20,000 volunteers of color joined the British side, about the same number of white people who fought as loyalists. On the other side, an estimated 9,000 black soldiers joined the Continental Army. Peter Salem fought at Bunker Hill, as did Titus Coburn. Agrippa Hull, a free black volunteer from Stockbridge, was an orderly for General Tadeusz Kosciuszko, a volunteer from Poland who treated Grippi as a friend and equal. William and Benjamin Frank, two other free-born men of color, fought with a Rhode Island regiment. Some enslaved men were brought to serve alongside the people who enslaved them. One such soldier may have been the husband of a woman named Betsy, or Bet, who had been enslaved since birth in Massachusetts. In 1781, 2 years before the war ended, Bet sued for her freedom in a Great Barrington court. She had heard the new Massachusetts state constitution read in public, which proclaimed that all men are created equal. She won her case, and it set a precedent that soon led to the abolition of slavery in Massachusetts. She took a new name, Elizabeth Freeman, but was called Mum Bet, Mum being a term of respect like ma'am. Bet's husband never returned. He may have been killed, or perhaps he fled to freedom in Canada. Bet probably knew this Irish lament.
Here I sit on When he comes back, will Mary be? Johnny has gone for a soldier. Me, oh my, I loved him so, broke my heart to see him go, and only time will heal my woe. Johnny has gone for a soldier. Sure, 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 Arun, sure, sure, and he loves me. When he comes back, will Mary be? Johnny has gone for a soldier. I'll sell my rock, I'll sell my reel, likewise I'll sell my spinning wheel, and buy my love a sword of steel. Johnny has gone for a soldier. I'll dye my dress, I'll dye it red, and through the streets I'll beg for bread. For the lad I love from me has fled. Johnny has gone for a soldier. Sure, 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 Arun, sure, sure, and he loves me. When he comes back, will Mary be? Johnny has gone for a soldier.
In 1781, General Henry Knox wrote to his wife Lucy that Lord Cornwallis's army had piled up their guns in surrender. Negotiations stipulated that the British were not allowed to display their flags, and they were not allowed to play Yankee Doodle. Peace negotiations began while fighting went on. In 1783, it was finally over. The treaty did not keep Lord Dunmore's promise, but stated that, quote, no property shall be removed, unquote, from the new United States. In Liberty's Exiles, Maya Jasanoff tells how the British evacuated 55,000 loyalists who had no future here. There were enslavers who wanted to keep the people they enslaved, and runaways who wanted to keep their freedom. They wound up in England, Jamaica, and other British colonies. In New York City, British officials loaded ships with refugees bound for Nova Scotia. General Washington arrived complaining that property was leaving in violation of the treaty. He meant hundreds of people of color. An official replied, "These people were free when I got here, and I have no reason to believe they are otherwise." One was Harry Washington, probably a field hand, someone with whom George did not have a personal relationship, unlike William Lee, whom he freed. Washington's views evolved throughout his life. In his will, he freed most of the people enslaved by his family. Thomas Jefferson, despite his declaration that all have the right to life and liberty, could not bring himself to impoverish his family. Monticello was valuable, but would not make money without 100 people toiling for no pay. During all the years that people were enslaved, those in bondage were by far the most valuable economic asset in the country. After peace was concluded, the fighting did not stop for a couple of years because British loyalists refused to give up. Unfortunately, most soldiers had gone home, so the army was desperate for people to try to suppress this ongoing insurgency. A woman named Deborah Sampson disguised herself as a man and enlisted, and they were delighted to have her. She got away with it because she was taller than all the women at the time and taller than most men, and she was strong, could handle a gun, and as I said, they were desperate, and there were no entrance physicals. So she served for a couple of years. She was wounded, and when she was discovered, she retired in glory and eventually received that precious pension at the urging of Paul Revere and from the pen of Governor John Hancock. I could not find any songs about her that I really liked, so I wrote one. Here is the Ballad of Deborah Sampson.
Oh, Deborah Gannett is my name, but my maiden name was Sampson. 'Tis among the poor that I was born, of luxuries we had none. And when I was 8, my old dad ran off, leaving too many mouths for feeding. I was sent to work on a Middleborough farm where 10 children needed keeping. Endless work in the house and plot, not a single girl in the whole wild lot. I was tall as an oaken tree. I was tall and as strong as can be. Bold as the spark in my blue, blue eyes, looking sharp for to fight for liberty. Well, I grew up fast and I grew up strong, made those boys walk a narrow line. When they came from school, sure I was no fool, all their lessons soon were mine. And at age 18, when I left the farm, I was working at the school. And I wove and spun all around the town after teaching the golden rule. It was 2 long years since the war began, and I longed to fight just like any man. I was tall as an oaken tree. I was tall and as strong as can be. Bold as the spark in my blue, blue eyes, looking sharp for to fight for liberty. How we all did cheer when we heard the news that at Yorktown we had won. But the blasted Tories, they would not quit, and the fighting lingered on. Oh, they cried for men faithful to the end, and I felt my heart a-stirring Why should I stay home when my country needed its newborn rights securing? I put off my skirts, made myself a pack, signed a made-up name, and I ne'er looked back. I was tall as an oaken tree. I was tall and as strong as can be, bold as the spark in my blue, blue eyes, looking sharp for to fight for liberty. Well, in '82 I marched off to fight. Robert Shirtliff became my name. I was known as a brave and a faithful lad as we tried the foe to tame. Then near Tarrytown I was wounded sore, my head cut by a saber, and a musket ball lodging in my thigh, awaiting bloody labor. When the cut was stitched, I away did come, did the rest myself with a knife and rum. I was tall as an oaken tree. I was tall and as strong as can be, bold as the spark in my blue, blue eyes, looking sharp for the fight for liberty. Well, they found me out and I went back home, though they mourned to lose such a soldier. They sent me off with a rousing cheer and a discharge filled with honor. I put on my skirts, settled down to wed, had 3 babes plus 1 a foundling. We were very poor, but old Paul Revere gave the governor a hounding. He said as a vet I should have my due. Hancock signed my pension in '92. I was tall as an oaken tree. I was tall and as strong as can be, bold as the spark in my blue, blue eyes, looking sharp for the fight for liberty. Oh, I traveled round when my babes were grown for to earn some ready money. Wore my soldier duds, told my soldier tale. Oh, they came like flies to honey. And my story spread all across the land, though the lies they told were many. I was just a brand new American, fury bound to do her duty. And as I grow old, how I oft recall the adventures I'd ne'er trade at all. I was tall as an oaken tree. I was tall and as strong as can be, bold as the spark in my blue, blue eyes, looking sharp for the fight for liberty. I was tall as an oaken tree, tall and as strong as can be, bold as the spark in my blue, blue eyes, looking sharp for the fight for liberty, for liberty.
In 1788, Massachusetts ratified the United States Constitution. Bells rang, cannons boomed, and more verses to Yankee Doodle appeared. There were 13 in this song, for the colonies were uniting as states. It says, "The vention did in Boston meet the convention." The vention did in Boston meet, the State House could not hold 'em. So then they went to Federal Street, and there the truth was told 'em. Every morning went to prayer, and then began disputing, till oppositions silenced were by arguments refuting. Now politicians of all kinds who are not yet decided may see how Yankees speak their minds and yet are not divided. So here I end my federal song, composed of 13 verses. May agriculture flourish long and commerce fill our purses.